What is up, wrestling fans? Welcome to another Pay-Per-Viewpoint edition of the Smark Out Moment Smack Talk podcast. It's time for the review and results breakdown of WWE NXT No Mercy 2024. Took place in Denver, Colorado, just ended a few moments ago. And of course, we're going to talk about the good, the bad, anything else in between here. If you don't know who I am your host, Tony Mango, again, flying solo for this edition. I'm assuming Rob is covering some kind of press conference or something. Maybe he ends up popping up a little bit later. Not too sure. But we will be, of course, addressing everything top to bottom. And I want to know what you have to say. So join me in the discussion in the comments below. If you are listening to this after the live fact, or if you are live, then join the live chat that's going on right now. You could always super chat things to make sure that I get my, it brings my attention to it. I do see that we have a song from Peter on here. Thank you for that, Peter. That's great. We're going to have to have that stuck in my head now for Joe Hendry's theme going forward. Yeah, so we are going to be breaking this down, and as I do always, I always want to know what you guys have to say, so if you are leaving your comments below, then make sure you're also clicking on all the different buttons that you can see on the screen. That would be great. Let's put this up on there for anybody that's not remembering this, forgetting. That's the opposite word for that. The Smark placed options. You've got the like button, of course, totally free, takes 2 seconds to do, and it is something that helps us out a lot on the YouTube algorithm. Also, keep in mind the thanks button if you want to toss a little spare change our way. You got the Patreon and YouTube channel membership there over on YouTube with the join button. Also, ring that notification bell for the email alerts for when we go live, because that is something that you've got the next pay-per-view coming up next week with AEW All Out. So we will do another post show for that one, as we've been doing for all these things. So, if you do want to help us out on the monetary side of things, though, you got the Darkcast tier, you got the Pick Your Poison tier, you always request different things, like we had talked about before. And if you want us to do something like a more expanded thing about Sid, or you want us to get into some tier list stuff or finance table things or whatever it might be. And also, if you want to pick up merchandise, Redbubble and TeePublic is where you can get that. Keep in mind the Discord server, too, is another place where you can chat it up. And then, we'll get into that later on. I'll talk about all these different kinds of things when we loop back around here. But the game plan right now is to break down NXT. So let's start getting into this. We've got the opening of the night past the pre-show. The pre-show was absolutely, pointless. Again, nothing happened on there. They didn't announce anything. They didn't establish anything different that you wouldn't be aware of or anything like that. So if you missed the pre-show, all you did was miss an hour's worth of talking for no reason. But the show started off pretty hot with the NXT Tag Team Championship on the line. Chase University's Andre Chase and Ridge Holland defended unsuccessfully the titles over the Supersonic duo, Axiom and Nathan Frazer, who they beat to win the championships, and they already lost it. It took 19 days, and they dropped the titles back to the team that had already had it before. Immediately after that, Ridge Holland turned heel, attacked the rest of Chase University, laid out Andre Chase in particular. They carted him off in an ambulance, so doing a whole injury angle with him going forward like that later on. And then Ava would address that and say she didn't have any kind of a medical update. So the story then becomes Ridge Holland was the reason why they won the tag team titles. Andre Chase gets pinned here by, I believe it was Nathan Frazer pinned him. Yeah, I think it was Nathan Frazer. I think Axiom did a Spanish Fly, and then Frazer did a Phoenix Splash, and they won. So it's going to be it reverts back to the previous champions. And then now the story with JSU is not only did they drop the titles, but Ridge Holland has turned heel, and he's going to either, I guess, continue to go after them, or is going to just be their main adversary going forward. Probably we can expect to see, even though it wasn't announced, they did announce some things from NXT for this next week. But for anybody who's wondering, it's Pete Dunne versus Trick Williams, Ora Mensa versus Lexis King, and the triple threat to determine who is going to be the next tag team title contenders. That's Hank and Tank, Gallus, and the Rascals. We'll get back to them a little bit later. They didn't announce anything going forward about any other kind of stuff with Ridge Holland or whatever, but I would assume that Ridge Holland is probably going to have a match with like Duke Hudson or Riley Osborne on NXT. they'll probably be looking to get some revenge, and then they'll probably go back around and kind of, loop this into an Andre Chase versus Ridge Holland thing going forward. But the match itself was good. Tag team title match. I liked a lot of it more than I thought that I was going to, because I was going into this being like, okay, well, I don't see the point in this, because if they retain the titles, it's pretty pointless. If they lose the titles, then the only thing that they could do that for is the Ridge Holland heel turn, but I don't really like that idea. And instead, I kept that same philosophy. Clearly, one of those things did happen, but I then can add on to it that the match itself was fun. So for anybody that was wondering, like maybe they were just doing it because they thought that the match would be really good, it was a pretty good match. So I give them credit for that. So I was higher on this segment overall than what I was heading into it. I still am not the biggest fan of Axiom and Nathan Frazer being the tag team champions, nor do I really think that those options for the next challengers are going to be good options for that too. Because let's put it this way, Hank and Tank are not going to win the tag titles right now. They're not going to even win this number one contenders thing. Gallus could win the number one contender shot and then fail. They might not, because Trey Miguel and Zachary Wentz, they would be a more interesting team to challenge the Supersonic duo going forward. So I'm kind of leaning in their direction. But that all depends on what happens with Wes Lee, because right after this match was the Zach Wentz versus Wes Lee match. And Wentz got out on top of that one with a little bit of help from Trey Miguel. They had a good match. They were going back and forth, doing all the flippy stuff that you would expect that they would be doing. And Miguel eventually pops up to interfere and to distract Wes Lee to a point that Zach Wentz is able to get a pin. And at some point, considering that they are likely not going to just give that as the end of the feud, it's not going to be just Wentz beats Lee and then we move on and we don't address this going forward. I would assume that Lee is going to either cost the Rascals the number one contenders match, or they're going to win the number one contenders match, and then the tag title match itself is going to have Wes Lee come out and screw them over. Kind of depends on how they want to go in that direction. I don't believe that they confirmed when that tag team match would happen, but I think that it probably is going to be happening on the premiere of CW's NXT. Also, we know that the NXT championship, the men's main championship, is going to be defended. Now we know, of course, who is going to be defending it. Not necessarily know who he will be defending it against, but we'll come back around to that later too. Peter was saying in the chat, I thought Chase was turning heel because he was all in the all black heel colors. Yeah, they had a couple different variations of that now, because they have the Chase U normal red shirt. They have the one where like the colors are flipped. They also had Champ U. It's like a gold one of them. But yeah, Andre Chase was wearing the black today, so it was a little bit weird. So I can see where you're going in that direction. Yeah, so Wentz and Lee, they had a good match. And this, even though they say that they're moving forward, you would assume Lee is probably going to get back into this. And, I don't know how they plan on finishing this feud, but I could see this being like Lee versus Wentz in a steel cage match or a last man standing match or something along those lines on the CW premiere. So that way they get another big match that doesn't necessarily have to have a title on the line. Could be for the X Division Championship. Maybe that's how they want to do it. Or it could be a combination of things. But I think that either in the number one contenders match or in the title match itself, depending on when those things take place, we're going to see Lee screw over the Rascals. It could be as simple as Lee screws over the Rascals on this number one contenders thing. Gallus wins, and we get Gallus versus Supersonic Duo at whatever that episode is. And then that already sets up Lee versus Wentz. I could see that being the case. What did we go next? We went with the NXT Women's North American Championship match. Kelani Jordan retained over Wendy Choo. This wasn't all that great. And by all that, not all that great, I mean, it kind of sucked. I like Kelani Jordan. I like Wendy Choo, but this had a lot of misfires in it. There were some botchy moments where it didn't seem like they really knew which move they were supposed to be doing next, or they did know, but somebody failed in the execution, and then that threw them for a loop. There was one spot in particular where I don't know what the goal was. I think that what was supposed to happen was Wendy Choo was on the, I think she was on the second rope, and Kelani was on the top rope. And I guess what was supposed to happen was Kelani was supposed to do like flip over Wendy Choo and do like a neck breaker, maybe. But instead, Wendy Choo just sort of fell backward, and Kelani just sort of went like, and just kind of jumped forward. So, there's a lot of moments like that throughout the match. It just wasn't all that great. So, I was disappointed in that because I like them both. Wendy Choo fails to win the title. That wasn't too shocking. And then after the match, Tatum Paxley went after Wendy Choo and placed that little Wendy Choo looking Barbie doll on top of her. So you would assume Tatum Paxley versus Wendy Choo is going to be on an episode of NXT coming up too. Maybe it's going to happen on this week's episode in 2 days. Maybe they're going to have something else happen on this Tuesday that's going to establish that for next week since they didn't announce it. But I could see that happening very, very soon. I don't think that that's something that they need to save for the premiere. I don't think anybody's really going to be that interested in it where that's going to be a big draw for it. But maybe that is their game plan. I don't know. The CW, actually, when does the debut happen? NXT debut on CW is supposed to be October 1st. So, if we're how many episodes away? So this Tuesday's and then 3 more episodes before that. They're going to do Tatum Paxley versus Wendy Choo before that. I can't imagine that they're going to wait that long. So, the whole, setup for the next episode of NXT and stuff, maybe we just get a match added in there. What's this comment from Peter saying on here? West versus Zach might end in TNA. Yeah, that's probably actually a good chance that happens there too, since, that is the X Division Championship where it should be, that's the home of that. So, if they do an X Division title match, it should happen in TNA rather than NXT. And it depends on where they want to prioritize it. I can't imagine that this is going to go as far as Halloween Havoc, though. We're dragging that out too long at that point. But Tatum Paxley, Wendy Choo, that whole thing. Kelani Jordan's probably going to move on to some completely other challenger going forward, and they haven't established what they're going to do to determine who is going to get the next title shot. But it could be any number of people. I mean, it could be Kendall Gray, it could be Carmen Petrovic, it could be Ariana Grace. They're gonna manufacture some kind of a segment where it's going to establish the next contender. So Kelani retains in the worst match of the night, followed by Oba Femi retaining the NXT North American Championship on the men's side of things against Tony D'Angelo. No real elements of this stand out to me. It was a solid match, but they had their back and forth. Oba Femi was still the bigger powerhouse of the two of them, but Tony D put up some good fights here and there, and they managed to make it seem like an even contest, at least enough where Tony D was putting up a fight for that. Not even in the sense that it ever really made it seem like I was, the belt is probably going to change hands now. I just assumed that Oba Femi would be retaining, so I went into that with that expectation. And then let me fix my hair right here. Nope, not fixing it whatsoever. Am I? And then they had a weird balance that they needed to make, where they needed to have Femi take some shots without necessarily looking weak in any way. And I think they pulled that off pretty well. Femi comes out of this looking stronger in the sense that he gets another title win over, a title retaining, I should say, over somebody who is a pretty established name and a kind of bigger guy on the roster. Tony D is he's a pretty big guy, bulky, So again, no establishment of who the next champion's challenger is for this. But I don't think Oba Femi's dropping that title anytime soon, so it really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. But they'll probably start some other kind of feud going forward. And, for all we know, maybe Ora Mensa versus Lexis King ends up becoming a number 1 contenders match or something. So good thing for Oba Femi to retain here. Tony D doesn't need the title, but it would have been good for him if he would have won it. But he had a good showing, too. Bound for Glory is the day before Halloween Havoc. Maybe they end up doing some kind of a 2-parter thing there. Might be. Roxanne Perez then retained the NXT Women's Championship over Jaida Parker. This was better than the Kendall Gray Wendy Choo match when it comes to the technical side of things, but I still didn't really like it all that much. I didn't like the way that they booked this, psychology psychologically the way that they booked this. Jaida Parker is much bigger than Roxanne Perez. Not much bigger in the sense that she's, 12 of Roxanne or something. The way that, like, you put Roxanne next to, like, Nia Jax. Nia Jax is taller and much bigger than her. But Jaida Parker is still significantly, like, if there were weight classes in WWE, they would not be on the same weight class. Let's put it that way. And Parker, even though she's the less established of the two, so she should be the one that is struggling more to think of ways to escape maneuvers, or the whole thing when they do the like, it's a veteran move for somebody to like roll out of the ring instead of getting pinned. That should be something that carries on here, but it shouldn't be taken to the level that I think that they went tonight. They ended up making, at least from my perspective, maybe people disagree with me on this, I came out of this looking like thinking that Jaida Parker looked like she didn't know what the hell she was doing. And maybe a part of that actually is Jaida Parker didn't really know what she was doing, like the performer, but then that would have led to more botches. So I don't think that that's what it was. I think that they just booked her as she is going to barely get off any offense here. And the match was completely dominated by Roxanne, to the point that I can't think of a single time in the match that a pinfall felt like it was going to go to 2.5 even for Parker. So they didn't wrestle a great style match from my point of view. I still don't think it was a smart idea to do this to begin with, because I don't understand why they needed to have Jaida Parker be the one that was going up against Roxanne. It's not like this is like her hometown or anything like that, where that was like a big focal point. Actually, I don't even know where Jaida Parker is from, but I don't think she's billed from Denver or anything along those lines. So she is from, let's see. Well, she was born in Florida. Yeah, so, yeah, I don't understand why they did this. But they did it regardless. And, if you like it to just be like, random, you don't have to necessarily have babyface and heel, or you don't necessarily have to have a storyline, more of like that New Japan AEW style, where it's just somebody is a wrestler, so they eventually will fight the champion, and then you just do the match. Then maybe you don't care as much about it as I do. But I am very more story and character based. I didn't like any of the setup for this, and I don't think that the match was planned out well. So I also don't think that the match was super just great as it was. It was better than Jordan and Choo, but it's the second worst match of the night for me. So it's gonna sound like I'm happy that I'm crapping on that I'm crapping on the women's division, but I'm just ranking the matches in order of how I like them. So I think that should hopefully be over with now, and that they won't continue to just like book Roxanne against a bunch of random heels like they did with like the Lola Face babyface turn, which I think that's kind of flawed too. But they have moved on to the next phase of this with the end of that, where after the match, Julia came out. She made her NXT debut, her WWE debut overall, outside of just being in the crowd for NXT Stand and Deliver. But the implication going forward, Julia is going to challenge Roxanne Perez on either the NXT debut on CW or maybe Halloween Havoc. They didn't confirm anything whatsoever about this. There's no number one contender spot. There's no like, oh, she's going for the title, and we'll see on Tuesday if she can win a number one contenders match or something like that. It was just a stare down, but we all know where that's heading. WWE is not going to have somebody make a debut after teasing that she was going to fight Roxanne, have her come out, confront Roxanne, who has no number one contender outside of her, and then just go, hey, everybody, it's actually going to be Gigi Doling returning and doing that instead. So whenever that happens, I could see Julia winning the championship just outright there, and Roxanne's held the title long enough. She can drop it with no problem whatsoever, and then we can move on going forward with some other kind of feuds going with like Roxanne and Stephanie Vaquer whenever they settle the visa issues and stuff. So big fan of what I've seen of the little bits of Julia matches here and there. And I'm excited to see what she does going forward. I would totally rather have her be champion right now than Roxanne if we can get a little step away from Roxanne as a heel, because I don't think that that's work at all. But yeah, this segment wasn't all that great. And then the finale of the night, the main event, was TNA's Hendry against Ethan Page for the NXT Championship. Trick Williams was the special guest referee. Not much to talk about as far as technical side of things or specific moments in here, but they did play well into the Trick being the special guest referee person in a way that I thought that they weren't necessarily going to do. I thought it was going to be as simple as they have the typical setup where Hendry is definitely the person that Trick Williams is leaning more towards being supportive of as a special guest ref. And he'll try to, slow count Ethan Page a little bit. He'll try to fast count Hendry a little bit. And then eventually Hendry is going to be upset about something. And then that's going to lead to it being a more even contest. I figured Trick would be attacked by Pete Dunne, who would then set up that Ethan could do something like low blow Hendry or whatever. A new ref comes out, counts a pin. That's the end of it. They didn't do that quite the same. They did have Trick get taken out, but not through Pete Dunne. And then a new referee comes in, but it's a kick out. And then you get DDT on the championship. You get some other things where Trick is like stopping the new referee. I think Teddy Rango was the one that came out. Might be wrong about that. And then Trick is back to being the referee in charge, and he has to count the pinfall for Ethan Page to retain. Then he gets attacked by Pete Dunne to end the night. Very strange ending for this, but they are basically setting up what I anticipate. It's most likely going to be Pete Dunne versus Trick Williams will somehow establish that the winner of that will fight for the NXT Championship. We'll get Ethan Page versus Trick Williams on the CW's premiere of NXT. And then from that point, we'll probably get Trick Williams winning the championship back, and then him, kind of reverting back to that point. So I thought that the match itself, Hendry versus Ethan Page, was fine, but nothing all that didn't stand out to me in any kind of way. I liked that they changed it up a little bit when it came to the special guest ref stuff, and then eventually just came around to the same outcome that we were kind of anticipating. So overall, what does that mean? I mean, overall, I think that this was about on par with what we got at Bash in Berlin. It's not a pay-per-view that I think if you missed it, that I would be like, oh my God, you have to go back and check out NXT No Mercy. And I'm sure that friends of mine, if they reach out and they go oh, I didn't see No Mercy last night, what happened? I'll just be like, it's this. Here's the lineup. You don't need to watch any of it. But I do think that some people put on a great show, and some people had some pretty damn good performances. So kudos to them. And going forward, now we know what's happening a little bit of the Tuesday episode of NXT. We know one match, at least for CW, for the premiere on October 1st. And we're going to kind of roll with the punches and see what happens with the new tag team champions and such. But, not my absolute favorite event of the year. And also not one that I can crap on. Just a run-of-the-mill show. So that's why I don't have as much to talk about for it again. Other than that, I think that pretty much covers everything. So keep in mind, of course, that we always have more pay-per-views coming up. So the next round of pay-per-view-point things will be AEW-based. Even though we just had All In, we're going to go switch over to All Out this coming Saturday or Sunday. I don't remember which one it is. Whichever one it is, we'll have the predictions beforehand. We'll have the post-show afterward. We'll have a round of the hot tags in between. And maybe a Darkcast, depending on how I can figure that out into the schedule. Might end up being a little bit later into September, or at least, the second week of September. But we'll see. So make sure you hit that like button. Make sure that you leave your comments below. Make sure that you are subscribed. Check out everything on the link tree. That's not the Bash in Berlin thing. I'm clicking on the wrong article here. Or not the wrong graphic. The link tree of amangotree.com. You can find all these links to Smark Out Moment content, Fanboys Anonymous content, and my own personal little accounts for some websites like Letterboxd and all. Put a couple more entries in that recently. Just watched The Game earlier today. Watched Tall Tale last night. One of these movies that I had always thought looked kind of ridiculous, and look at that, it ended up being. Check out that Discord server, as I mentioned before, and stay tuned for anything else that's happening across the universe of A Mango Tree. Until then, though, everybody, that's going to do me in, so thanks for listening. This has been another Smark Out moment, and I'm being counted out.